Welcome to Women Entrepreneurs Radio. I'm your host, Deborah Bailey. And when I started this show in 2008, I was on a mission to promote women-owned businesses and help women succeed by providing resources and valuable tips from other women and men, small business owners. In each interview, my guests speak openly about their triumphs, the scary times, and tough decisions they had to make along the way. Women Entrepreneurs Radio is about showing women how to harness their natural strengths to achieve success on their own terms. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Women Entrepreneurs Radio with your host, Deborah Bailey, and I am so glad that you could join me today. And if you're listening to this on Podomatic, you can also go to find this show on iTunes, Women Entrepreneurs Radio. You can do a search, or you can come to womenentrepreneursecrets.com. And you look under the menu item on the radio, and you can click there, and you could find links for the different platforms where you can find the show. So you can click right through and subscribe on iTunes, of course, on Podomatic, or on other platforms that you may find the show. Just added some selected shows to different places like YouTube and SoundCloud, and also the archive of the older shows has been moving off of Blog Talk Radio and onto Libsyn. So that's also another link that you will find there, and also some have been posted to LinkedIn. So there's different places that you can listen in. So, just check us out when you see it wherever you are. And please be sure to share that on social media, and that would be great. So we're going to get started today with a very, I think, very interesting discussion for entrepreneurs in particular about how to create your authority through authorship. And I think there's really going to be a lot that you can learn here. So today we've got award-winning entrepreneur and Amazon overall #1 best-selling author, Julie Broad, and she's here to share how you can be part of the 1%, how you can write a brand-boosting book that builds for business and puts you in the company of the less than 1% of the population that's written a book. And this is something she knows well from her own experience as an author and as the founder of a new service called Book Launchers, which will help you write, publish, and sell that brand-boosting book. A Canadian who's recently moved to Los Angeles, California. I want to welcome Julie Broad to the show. So welcome, Julie. I'm really glad to have you here.
Thanks, Deborah. I'm really glad to be here.
Wonderful. So, it looks like you have been able to connect to that elusive Amazon #1 best-selling category, which a lot of authors are, that's something I'm sure a lot of them will be very excited about, because that's what a lot of people have, in mind that they would like to reach as well, or even just to get their book out there. I think is a thing that they really are anxious to do, and then see how well that they can, promote it and get it out there and get it selling. So if you could start out, Julie, a little bit, just sharing what was your experience, to get you to where now you're one of the 1% out here with your book and your success.
Yeah, thanks. So, one of the things, just touching on the bestseller thing, I want to start that right away, because a lot of people really get excited about it. A lot of companies use it to market. And the one thing I'll say is, especially when it comes to Amazon, anybody, and I do mean this, anybody can be an Amazon bestseller, because the gimmicks that are used to get you to be an Amazon bestseller are really, it's very well known in the industry now. And Amazon's starting to crack down on it. They're starting to kind of say you can't use Amazon bestseller anymore unless you can prove that you really were one. Because what people do is they have sub categories on Amazon. And so a lot of people will become a bestseller in that sub category, which means you have to sell maybe 5, 10, sometimes 20 copies because you find that, elusive category that there's not very much competition in. And you get, 10 friends to buy a book all at the same time. And boom, now you've got number one status. So anybody can be in a sub category. And so for me, I always encourage people not to focus on it, you don't really have control. If you want to be a real bestseller, you don't have control. There's a whole bunch of things you can do that give yourself a better chance of being a real bestseller, but you don't have control over it. So I'd say, forget about the bestseller for the most part and just focus on your business goals. What do you want this book to do for you? And yes, saying you're a bestseller has some credibility to it, but more and more as people find out how easy it is to call yourself an Amazon bestseller, it'll go away. And I have one little funny story on this. There was a guy named Brent Underwood who was tired of everyone saying they were an Amazon bestseller. And so he decided he was going to prove how bogus it was. And he took a picture of his foot, put it on the cover of a book, uploaded it to CreateSpace, and he made it an Amazon bestseller. And you can actually find this on Amazon. I think it was called Behind the Scam. Or no, there was an article about it that called, if you Google it, Behind the Scam, What It Takes to Be a Best-Selling Author, and you'll find it.
Oh my God.
So forget about that. And any company that says guaranteed bestseller, they're doing this, right? They're getting you to be a bestseller in a sub category, which has a tiny amount of ego boost and a tiny amount of credibility to it. But again, really, it doesn't sell very many copies of your book. And at the end of the day, you're probably writing a book to be read. What I did with my first book, I actually, the stars aligned. It's really tough. I don't know if I'll ever see it again in my life, but the stars aligned for me. A bunch of things happened and went well. And I hit number one overall, hanging out with Dan Brown and the Game of Thrones series, all these kind of things. But to even try and achieve that again for myself, it's just one of those things where a lot of things happen all at once. I wasn't competing with a big blockbuster at the, if somebody else comes out with a blockbuster that day, you're doomed, right? So focus on your own business goals and, definitely plan to market the heck out of it, but don't worry so much about things like calling yourself a bestseller.
That's wonderful advice, and I certainly will check out that the example that you gave. It's kind of funny that you would do that. So that's kind of funny, but I certainly will check that out, and I think that's great for people to be aware of, so they can know, they can tell the difference between what really should be more important to them, at this point. But as far as, if someone is a business owner, and they're like, wow, I really need to get a book, or I feel I want to establish, myself, what do you recommend for people to get started? Should they, a lot of times people don't even have a topic, they don't realize what they know, so they're like scratching their head, what should I do? What should I put out there? What do you recommend to people who have these questions about where to start?
Yeah, there's lots of ways to approach it, but I think especially if you're in business, you want to kind of look again at what your business goal is. So what do you want this book to do for you? And then reverse engineer it from there. So if you want to be known as an expert in X industry, well, obviously you have to write a book in that industry. And now you're going to brainstorm all the ideas you have, look at what's already out there, find that niche where people are interested, but also you have something unique to offer. Because you kind of want to go where there's a hungry crowd. So you want to be in a category where there's a lot of people that want to read it, but you need to be just that little bit different. And a lot of people, this is where people go, oh, I haven't done enough. I don't have enough experience. I don't have enough, I don't have enough. I'm not enough, whatever it is, and we all go through that. But that's where doing a little bit of research or working with someone, and this is part of why I started my company, is I have a writing coach on the team as well as a client care person. And all they do is look at your book and help you with the hook and make sure it's in alignment with your goals, and they take a look at the competition with you to figure out where you can fit in. So if you're one of those doubters, find somebody who can work with you, hire a writing coach or hire a company that will have someone coach you through this, because it's really hard for you to see what makes you special in a lot of cases. And so working with someone who can draw out your stories will help. The other piece is if you really truly know in your gut that you just aren't experienced enough to write a book, then do something like Napoleon Hill, right? Think and Grow Rich. It wasn't his advice. He interviewed the rich people of that day. And by virtue of that, he learned the lessons and was able to share that. So you can look at that niche that you want to be the expert in. And if you have some stories, you have expertise. Everybody has some sort of value to offer. You can weave that in amongst people who are just that much further down the road. And again, if you have that unique spin, you'll be now associated with them. So if you know the principles of what builds trust and authority, you're now associated with those experts. That elevates your expertise. Plus, by researching and interviewing people like that, you elevate your expertise. So there's so many ways to go at this and start. But I think always think about what's your primary goal. So, and there's usually a couple, right? You might have a goal of, I want to be able to be a paid speaker, in this subject. And I have a really important message that I want to share. So those two goals, you think about those. And again, look at the competition, look what's out there, and reverse engineer so you can create a book that reaches your goals and has a hungry audience.
That's great. That's a wonderful way to look at it. And because I think it's very interesting, a lot of times people don't consider, as you said, that there's an audience for it. They just want to get this thing out there, but they're not really thinking about who's, are there people there waiting for this or ready to buy it or not? I think that's very interesting that often people don't think that way.
Yeah. And I think, I get quite a few people coming to me saying, I've finished my book. I've had a couple scenarios. I'm working with one person who actually had uploaded the book to his website and tried selling it and didn't sell. I had another woman who got it on Amazon and it didn't sell. And so she's coming to me after the fact saying, can you help me sell it? And I'm looking at it going, well, it's not unique. Like, are you okay going back to the drawing board and, you've got some material here, but we need to find that hook. We need to find what makes you unique. And in both cases, they hadn't thought about who their ideal reader was. They just sat down and started to write. And, which is entrepreneurial spirit. I love it. The ready fire and then aim after. But, to go to all the time, energy, and money that goes into creating a great book, you do want to spend a little bit of time just aiming a bit before you start writing. And that really comes down to thinking about who is that ideal reader? How are you going to find them and connect with them? And what do they really want to be reading about? Like, how can you help them?
That's true. And I'm sure listeners are going to really appreciate hearing that piece of advice, because you write the entire book and then you find out that maybe it should have been, focused a little differently or to a different reader. So I can imagine that would be a little frustrating for people to discover after that, but it's good for people to know straight out that it makes more sense to have a target. But as far as like those people who may feel uncomfortable about writing or know they're not really good writers, I know ghostwriting is very popular. Is that something that you recommend that they do? There's a couple places I want to go with that thought. So a good ghostwriter can be a fabulous addition to your team. If you don't write, if you really don't want to write, can't write, hate your writing, etc. The challenge is that a lot of people will not hire the right kind of ghostwriter, because a good ghostwriter is $15,000, $20,000 or more to write a proper nonfiction book. So that's a pretty big chunk of change. Now you can get them cheaper, but the challenge is you're not going to get I shouldn't say you're not going to. It's rare that you'll get a really good ghostwriter who can capture your voice, who can, really express your expertise in a way that sounds like you, because you're doing this
to build yourself as the expert, right? I'm not talking about fiction or anything like that. This is to build you as that authority. And if your voice doesn't come through, your brand isn't being built. So you have to, if you're going to go the ghostwriter route, you have to get a good one. And to get a good one, most of the time, unless you get lucky, you're going to be paying a lot of money for that ghostwriter. So that's one thing to really keep in mind. The other thing is there's a lot of ways to tackle this if you don't like to write or you don't think you're a good writer. Editing is magical. Everybody needs to have their book professionally edited, at least by a copy editor. I recommend a content editor, a copy editor, and a proofreader. Because when again, this is to build your brand. You don't want your brand to be half-assed, right? You want your brand to showcase you well. And to do that, you really need to have the same quality as a traditionally published book. And a traditionally published book goes through content editing, copy editing, and proofreading. So I recommend that. So that's one part of it. The other part is you can dictate a lot of your book. So if you really hate to write, can't write, don't have time to write, you can dictate it. And I've done this. I'm working on a new project now, and I've been dictating it on my phone because I have a new baby. I have a 4-month-old. And so I find myself, feeding him a lot, which means that my hands are tied up, right? So I can't type. So I will dictate. And then there's a service called rev.com. They charge $1 a minute to transcribe it. It's excellent transcription. So they transcribe it for me. And now I've got something to work with. And again, this is also where having an editing coach or a content editor to work with you side by side to help you go through your material. It'll help build your confidence and also help you cull material, whether you're writing it or dictating it.
That's very good. That's great advice too. And I think that's, I think with the ghostwriting, I'm sure a lot of people don't realize, for a good one, how much they would have to pay for that type of service. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. So people know, that they really want to hire someone who's going to do their work justice, and they really have to be careful about. One woman that I've been speaking with lately, who's a ghostwriter, she only needs 2 book projects a year to make a very good income. So that tells you how think they're very time consuming. It takes her 6 months to write a book. So it makes sense, right, that you'd be paying, she makes more. I would guess, I didn't ask her outright, but I would guess she's making at least $50,000 a book. But if that takes her half a year of her time, she should be well compensated for it. Right. Exactly. And that's the thing, I think what's kind of, I guess kind of amusing to me is that a lot of times people, they know they need writing, they know they need something written, but they don't understand the work that goes into creating that.
Yes, exactly.
They don't realize how much goes into it for it to come out the quality that they would like it to be. It's not something that can be just thrown together. And I'm sure, many people appreciate that and know that. So, but, there's probably some that kind of underestimate what is involved. And maybe they also do it when it comes to their own time. They think, oh, I can write this really fast. And and they've got all these plans, and then they realize it's a big project that they're taking on. But, speaking of that, with self-publishing, really being a major thing and traditional, when it comes down to, say, the entrepreneur who wants to get their book out there, what do you recommend, one over the other, or you just, have work with them no matter which direction that they want to go in?
Yeah, there's a couple things to note. So traditional publishers, there's certainly value in them. You're much more likely to be able to get your book on the New York Times bestseller if it's traditionally published. It's very, very, very rare that you'd ever see a self-published book on one of those major type lists to date. I think that'll change. But if that's your real driving goal, then you're probably going to have to pursue a traditional publisher. But if you're going that route, you probably want to have an agent that would take you, because you can get eaten alive with the contracts. And so think about this. It's your expertise that's going into the book. And I have two friends actually that have purchased their book rights back from traditional publishers because they found that they didn't actually own their content. So when they went to create courses or sell workshops or do talks and make money from those talks, but it was content from the book, they didn't actually own that content. So they were very limited as to what they wanted to do. And then another one wanted to turn it into an audiobook, and that publisher owned the rights to it, but didn't want to do an audiobook. And so they couldn't have an audiobook. So there's some limitations. And also traditional publishing goes really, really slow. So, if you want to get your book out within the next 12 months, even 6 months with self-publishing, if you're ready to work hard, you can do it. With traditional publishing, you're looking at 18 to 24 months, very typically. And a lot of people think the advantage of working with a traditional publisher is that you're going to be able to sell a lot more books, but the marketing's still on you. So no matter what, you're going to have to do the marketing. And the traditional publisher takes a massive cut of the royalties, whereas when you're self-publishing, you own the content, you have creative control, you get to keep all of the royalties, and guess what? You still have to market it. So there are advantages to traditional publishing in terms of distribution, and like I said, you can get access to certain things. The big media are more likely to feature you in that category, but for a lot of people in the space where they're using it to become an expert or to share their knowledge, I think self-publishing is a great venue, and that's where I focus my client base. We're all about helping people navigate the muddy waters of self-publishing, and then at the end of the day, because I think writing the book is definitely a big hurdle, but then selling it is your next big challenge, and so my process with our clients starts with writing that book and takes you all the way to let's make sure you've got a wicked launch plan, and we'll help you get that book out there and selling it into copies into readers' hands is what I say.
That's perfect. So why don't you share with everyone where they can find out more about you and your business?
Yeah, you bet. So my company is Book Launchers, and it's booklaunchers.com. And there's a launch letter. So if you just want tips and tools to help you self-publish and write, you can sign up for the launch letter on our website. There's some couple cool free ebooks on, how to sell your book and how to do a book on a budget. You can download those. And if you want to connect with me, you can go to our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/book launchers. And Twitter is the Julie Broad. That's how you get me on Twitter. So lots of ways to find me and connect with me. But if you're interested in learning more about books and book publishing, going to booklaunchers.com is the best place.
And, I guess especially now with social media, there's so much more so many more ways that authors can promote, but then it just seems like it's almost sometimes overwhelming with the amount of different places that you could be. Different platforms. You mentioned a launch plan. When do you recommend that the writers kind of start thinking about that? Should you do it before you start writing?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's when we start with our clients. Our very first call that we have with our clients is basically planning everything from writing all the way through to the launch. And again, it's thinking about that ideal reader and where are you going to find them. But I'm glad you mentioned social media, because the number of people when I talk to them and I say, okay, what's your current plan for selling your books? And they say social media, and that's their plan. And it's hard to know for sure. I mean, I have links that track different things. It's hard to know for sure how many books I sold through social media, but I have a decent presence on social media, and I don't think I sold very many books through social media. What sold books were things like my email newsletter list, connecting with other people who have strong newsletter lists within the market, or reaching those people that I know are the ideal readers for this book, and having kind of launch giveaways. So having high quality things that people would otherwise pay for, which seems crazy. I've put thousands of dollars of expertise into a $20 book, and I still have to give them $200 in courses or $200 in other things to incent them to go buy the book. But those are the kind of things that work. Speaking engagements, the right media attention. But social media does work, but you have to have a plan. You have to use a channel that you like and that your ideal readers are hanging out on, because it doesn't do you any good to post something on Twitter 45 times a day, and your ideal reader never ever reads it because they're not on Twitter.
That's a very good point. It's a very good point. And it seems so obvious, but it really isn't so obvious, because I think people tend to think, oh, everybody's on this platform, everybody's on that platform, but they're not thinking about, well, who's your reader and where are they? You know, so that's an excellent point about how people can think about this a little differently. But, you know, when people are doing, you know, thinking about selling their books, and we keep hearing how many books there are out there and how many books are on Amazon. I mean, you know, how do you get through?
Yeah, and it's something you need to be thinking about. And again, this is another reason why I really think you need professionals on your team. You need a professional book designer. I see so many people trying to, you know, they go get their book designed on Fiverr.com, which Fiverr is a great resource for a lot of things, but your book cover needs to stand out in a thumbnail format, in a print format, and you need somebody that understands that. And so you want to spend $500 on that book cover design. And because again, this is your brand, you're showcasing you and your expertise. And I think a lot of people try to cut corners where they really shouldn't be cutting corners. And that's where you don't stand out. Out of 8 million books on Amazon, you need to be thinking about how are you going to stand out in that tiny little thumbnail that appears on everybody's screen, and being strategic with things like that. But, you know, so while you say there's 8 million, Amazon and other places, they do a great job of marketing. If you get a lot of things right in the beginning, Amazon does market it for you. So you know, it does put it in that also bought category. It puts, you know, in the recommended. And there's ways for you to, you know, strategically show up in those boxes, you know, understanding some metadata and some keywords and things like that, which again is why I think you want to have some professionals on your team that understand these things and can help you, guide you through these, so you don't have to worry about all these pieces. But those kind of things will help you sell it. And again, if you focus on there's 8 million books on Amazon, how am I going to stand out? You might kind of get bogged down. But go back to that 1% stat that we talked about at the beginning. You know, about 30% of the population roughly has a degree, right? A bachelor's degree or some sort of post-secondary education, but less than 1% has written a book. So forget about the 8 million books on Amazon and focus on the fact that, you know, a lot of people you're competing with in your industry have degrees. They probably even have master's degrees. How are you standing out in your industry? What are you doing? And a book, still, if you look around, there's very few people in that industry, I bet, that has a book, a high quality book that people are talking about. So if you can be that person, that's how you become that 1%. And so you have to be known and you have to get that book out, but you don't really have to worry about the other 8 million books. You got to worry about how you're standing out in your industry.
That's true. I think that what happens a lot of times, people think, well, everybody has one, because I guess so many people talk about writing one. But when you look at it, well, how many people really do in your industry who, you know, you may be coming up, not against, quote unquote, but, you know, if there are other speakers or coaches or people who are doing similar things, how many of them really do have that book?
So in the chat, so there's two things I'll say to that. One is go through your Facebook friends, go through your Facebook friends and look at how many have books, because that's kind of probably a good cross section of the population. And even if you're like me and you have a lot of friends who are in the speaking industry, or who have, you know, built companies, and there are, you know, I have probably a disproportionate number of friends that have books, but there's still probably only 10% of my friends have books, if even that high, 5% probably. So that's the one thought I had on that. And then the other thought was basically, you know, if everybody in your industry has a book, then are you falling behind because you don't have one?
That's true. That's an excellent point too. That's true, because then you may really need to step up and get that out there. Yeah, so you can be on that level that you need to be on. So that's an excellent point. Wow, there's a lot of good information here. You know, when you decided you want to start your business and you want to do this, you know, were you motivated by your own experiences, you know, getting out there with your first book, or, you know, what drew you to say, I'm going to do this and help people to get out here?
there was a couple factors. The one factor was, well, actually, yeah, there's quite a few. The one was that a lot of people have been asking me questions about book publishing for years, since my first book, and then when I put out my second book. I just got lots of questions, to the point where I just started filming YouTube videos to answer the common questions just for fun, so that because I don't like to be one of those people who says I don't have time to help you, but at the same time I'm busy and I really don't have time to help everyone. So I started to shoot YouTube videos and just send it to people, saying, here, I've covered that in this YouTube video. Saved me a lot of time. But that just reinforced, that I knew stuff about book publishing. So more and more people kept coming to me. So that was part of it. The other part was that I had a coaching and education business in Canada, and I'd been doing it since 2008. And I was just growing tired of it. Just really wanted to switch gears and not be telling people how to do things and doing things for them. Because again, we're all busy, and I just felt like I just wanted to offer a service where, yes, you're writing your book, but we're trying to do as much as possible from that point forward for you. And even with writing, how can I make it easier? And that's why I have a writing coach on staff that works with each of our clients. So that was the other part. And then I'm a new mom, as I mentioned. And so I was pregnant as I was kind of dreaming up this idea. And I kept thinking, I can't be the coach. I need to have a team of people who are the experts in what they do, that are helping people. Because if I want to be home with my boy, if he's sick, or, if he's got something going on, I want to be there for him. And the challenge when you're running a coaching business is you're the person. You're the person.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And I think what we really need to come to terms with is, especially with so much going on, so many things that you are expected to do, like we were talking about social media, and there's so many platforms, and then especially your self-publishing, and then you have your business. We're talking about metadata and all these different aspects that maybe a few years back no one was really mentioning. It seems like it's really impossible to do this without having some kind of a team helping you or something. I think it's less something that you can do by yourself and really deliver a quality product.
It's really hard. I mean, even when I did it myself, I didn't have a team like I've created to help people, but I had to hire all the experts, which actually takes so much more time.
Yeah.
I had to find each individual piece. And so that took time and energy too, asking for referrals and looking up websites and checking the reviews. And, it's a ton of work. But yeah, you can't be an expert in all things. You have the things you're really good at. And I think that's what you focus on. And, your time is valuable. So I always look at something with, well, I could spend 100 hours figuring this out, or how much, if I spent 100 hours marketing my business, or heck, relaxing, what is that worth to me? Right. So it's a decision that you have to make, your budget. But at the end of the day, I think the model for getting your book to pay itself back, when you're doing a nonfiction book to build your brand, it's pretty easy. I mean, if you're a realtor, you probably have to sell one book, or have one book lead to a client for that to pay for the entire process, right? Just as an example. So if you look at your business, how many clients do you need to get from the book for it to pay for itself? And it's not about the book, the $6 or $7 you make every time you sell a book. It takes a long time to pay off a book. But if you're using it to grow your business, it doesn't take that long to pay off, $6,000 investment to write a book.
Yes, that's true. And as you said before, if someone knows why they're doing it and what their objective is when they start, then they already have an idea and some kind of a plan before they get started. Yeah. So they're not kind of wondering, well, why did I do this and how am I going to use it to my benefit? They already have that in place, and that's pretty fantastic. If you're going to put so much work into it, you really want to have an idea of how are you going to apply it before you get it. Before you get it done, I would think, so I think that's a, really, really good idea. So, Julie, you've shared so much with us, and the time, of course, has gone by so quickly for us to go over this, but, do you have any final thoughts on, on an author who wants to, really gain the authority in their field, or, any other thing you'd like to, comment on?
Yeah, I'll mention two things. So one thing is to remember that this book has a much longer shelf life than any other marketing that you'll ever do. Nobody, people will throw out your business cards and they'll throw out your brochures in a heartbeat, right? Sometimes as they're leaving the room after meeting you, they're tossing that stuff. But very few people will ever throw a book out. So if you do a really good job of the book, it has a long life. And so that's marketing that gets passed around, lent to friends, sits on coffee tables. It's a really, really strong thing, but you want to do a good job of that book because again, you want to be proud to hand that to anybody, right? You happen to bump into Richard Branson one day. You want to be proud to hand him your book, right? So thinking about it that way. But again, always, I think I just want to emphasize what we've talked about and really do some planning at the beginning before you write your book for that reason, because it does last a long time and you want it to have a good impact on your business, but also a good impression on other people so that it does help you achieve your business and your personal goals around that book. And that starts at the beginning by thinking about who is my ideal reader and what do I really want to accomplish from this book? And if you do really, really want bestseller status, why? Dig into that, why you want that bestseller status, because you're going to want to figure out how else you can achieve whatever it is that you think bestseller is going to give you, just in case you don't get there.
Yeah, and I definitely think that for some people it's a lot of course, the ego boost is there, but a lot of times, I guess in the media where we've always heard about bestseller, you think, well, that must mean something that's going to give me more, than everything else is. But as you said, then ask yourself, what are you hoping to get out of it? And, maybe you're getting it in some other ways. The thing you're looking for may be coming in other ways in how you promote your book and other things that it offers for you. So I think that's perfect. A perfect way to look at it, especially for the business person who, may have a few objectives for, for publishing. So they really want to make sure that it fits those, when they get started. So, wow, this has been really great, Julie. I think you're going to help a lot of people who have talked about writing a book, because there's a lot out here. I know I meet them all the time. I'm sure that Julie does, particularly in her business. So, everybody listening, if that's you or someone then this is good stuff, and you could also check out Julie's company and see if there's some things that can help you to get out there with your book and really claim your authority in your business. Yeah.
And if you're not sure, if you're listening and you're not sure if your book idea is good, or you just have questions and you want to have a chat about your book, there's a link on booklaunchers.com. You can fill out a form and we can hop on the phone. And I'm very straight to the point. If I think that you need to develop your idea more, I will tell you. If I say that it's too early, I want people to have massive success with their books. So it does me no good to sell you on writing a book with us if you're not ready or you're not committed to doing the work that has to be done. So yeah, please feel free to reach out. We'll have a quick conversation about your book, and I can help you decide what kind of the next course of action is, whether it's book launchers or something else.
And also, that also gave me another thought. What you were saying about this piece of marketing, in a sense, is still going to be out there, and that really has made a difference with all of especially with ebooks and audiobooks certainly continuing to grow. In addition to self-publishing, you don't even have to worry about, well, maybe your book was in a bookstore and now it's gone after a certain amount of time. It's all these things are around and they're going to stay available. So that changes everything, I think. What you create really has to be top notch, because it's not just going to disappear after you do.
It's right. And, I talked to one fellow, and he said, I used to be really scared of dying. But he said, I've written 3 books now. And he said, that's my legacy. He said, I've written books I'm proud of. And he said, and now I'm not, he said, I don't want to die, but I'm not scared anymore. He said, I feel like my legacy is left behind now, and it's something I'm proud of. So that always kind of rings in the back of my head. So I thought I would share that too.
Yes. And it's true though, because you've written something that's going to be there and for other people after you to learn from, or, depending on what you're writing, be entertained by. So it's totally different than it was before.
Yep.
Yeah, which of course has changed everything in the industry, but that's probably a whole other topic. all the technology and how it's continuing to change everything in publishing. That's certainly another discussion, because that's a big one too. But
yeah, we could talk about that all day.
I think so. That certainly is. But I want to thank you, Julie, for coming and sharing this information about yourself and publishing and about your business. This has been a really very good discussion. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Deborah.
So everyone, I know you enjoyed it, and I know you are interested, or someone who is. Okay, so make sure you follow through and follow up, because there's a lot of good stuff here that you can learn from, and you certainly could see if this is something that you'd want to pursue and get your book out there and get going. I think it's wonderful advice. So everyone, it's been Women Entrepreneurs Radio with your host Deborah Bailey. And I'm really glad you could join me today. And thank you so much. And we'll see you next time. Bye. Thanks for joining us. You can also join in the conversation on Facebook.com/Women Entrepreneurs and on the website, WomenEntrepreneursSecrets.com. And don't forget to listen in on dvcoach.podomatic.com and on iTunes.